because I have had a great experience with the Coyotes. I mean, building out my own team, having a group that's collaborative, and we have a tremendous team that impacts the business. And
Welcome to episode 148 of The Route, presented by White Whale Marketing. The Route is a glorified sports business coffee that has a new guest every episode as they share their experiences and route in sports. As always, I'm Christopher Nascimento, and let's get started. Before we get into today's guest, just a couple things to cover. First off, if you are watching us on YouTube via the video podcast, see the top hand corner of the screen here. It says The Route, and beneath that says at The Route Sports. That is our handle on all social media platforms. And when I mean all, I'm saying Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. So essentially all those traditional ones that would come to mind, where you can find, episodes, release dates, as well as the different clips that are associated with the podcast as well. So if you have the time, make sure to follow us there. But most importantly, when it comes to that social handle, it's our LinkedIn account. So maybe a little bit different from other podcasts, considering the people that we're interviewing, the people that are listening to this podcast. Our LinkedIn page is a great way to connect with myself, the guests, maybe even people that are just engaging with those posts that might be like-minded to individuals you'd like to have in your network. So it's great to, start, grow, maintain your network within the sports business space. So make sure to check us out there at The Route Sports. And every week you'll get a post on LinkedIn just saying, hey, this is this week's guest, and this is how you can find their episode. The second thing I want to cover before we get into today's guest is don't forget to follow, subscribe, rate 5 stars, like the podcast on whatever platform you consume this content. As I mentioned, video is on YouTube underneath the White Whale Marketing YouTube channel. So it's White Whale MKTG. We have the Route playlist there where we have shorts and different clips available as well. And then for audio platforms, we're on Apple, Google, Spotify, Amazon, and I believe 6 others. So wherever you can find us, make sure to follow, subscribe, rate 5 stars, as it allows the podcast to grow a little bit easier. Now, with all that said, we can get into today's guest. I'd now like to welcome someone who has risen through the data, strategy, and analytics world of sports with previous stops at IBM, Accenture, Chicago Bulls, NFL, Mylands, Vayner Talent, and the current Director of Strategy and Analytics at the Arizona Coyotes, Sam Marks. Welcome to The Route. How's it going?
Going well. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me, Chris.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm excited to get into today's route, as I mentioned to you before we began recording. But as the podcast name states, it's called The Route. So do you mind maybe taking us from, where you decided to attend school or what program you decided to start off in? And then how did you end up in the position you're in today?
Yeah, it's a great story, and one that I'm not even 100% sure of even today. I think we're all the product of being in the right place, the right time, and taking a bit of a leap of faith when you had a lucky opportunity. And so I'll preface everything by saying this is my story, but I hope, if you take nothing else away, Chris, that it's more putting yourself out there and putting yourself in the right situations, and then just timing and luck. And so I grew up in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. Many of your listeners might know that is the home of a very popular basketball team. Of course, I was a fan of the other team down the street, and that's where I ended up going for undergrad. So I went to Duke University, spent 4 years at Duke. Amazing experience. Again, some of your listeners might know they have a very popular basketball team as well. I was one of those students that slept out in a tent for a month to go to the Carolina game. Was quite involved on campus with sports. Really loved my experience there, and worked for the athletic department as an intern one summer in sports marketing, and also worked for the basketball program and game day operations for 3 seasons while I was there. And so, really, just a great experience. Loved my time at Duke. Entered thinking I was going to be pre-med. Took a couple classes of chemistry and figured out I wasn't going to be pre-med, although I ended up majoring in chem, but pretty quickly decided I didn't want to go into medicine. And I wasn't exactly sure what to do with that. And so ended up majoring in chemistry and econ. So had a pretty weird combination of degrees that to this day I get asked about. Well, why did you pick these two? There doesn't seem to be any overlap, and there really isn't. I think it was two very different skill sets, but I think when I graduated, I had actually a very unique combination of an understanding of markets and finance and how businesses and how macro economies run. But also, my chemistry background gave me a very analytical framework with which to approach the world and solve problems. And while, as you noted, I didn't end up using my chemistry degree really anywhere, I think what I do use is my adherence to scientific method, data driven decision making, using information to make better choices and more informed next steps is something that's very, very important. And I credit a lot of that to my chemistry background. In hard sciences, it's either right or it's not, right? And so I graduated and I wasn't exactly sure what to do with that. And so I ended up going into consulting. And as you noted, I spent 4 years in management consulting, working for a variety of different clients. So I was traveling, doing the Monday to Thursday travel thing, got a lot of airline miles, got some hotel status. Still wasn't quite worth it, but enjoyed travel and enjoyed getting to see a lot of different clients. And the last 2 years that I was doing consulting, I was primarily working with clients in the media, entertainment, and sports space. And so we worked with clients all across the sports business value chain. I mean, teams and leagues sort of similar to the area of the world that I operate in today, but also international media rights holders, over the top streaming platforms, technology companies, cable MSOs, everything across that sports business value chain. I got some exposure to, and it was a very validating experience for me. And I decided that this is what I wanted to do full time. I decided I wanted to pivot into this industry. I wasn't exactly sure how to do that. And so what I ended up doing, I did what anyone else would do. If you want to pivot, you don't know how to do that. I went and got an MBA. And so I went back to Duke. I'm a two-time offender. Spent another 2 years at Duke getting my MBA. And while I was at Duke, I did everything I could to get exposure to the sports business world. And so I was hoping, Chris, to pressure test this goal, not just to prove to recruiters and HR managers, but to prove to myself that this is what I wanted to do. And so I did everything I could to get exposure. And so, as you alluded to, I'm very fortunate. I worked with the Chicago Bulls as a student consultant for several months on their fan segmentation model and with their business analytics and strategy team. I was very fortunate. I interned with the NFL league office in New York in the corporate strategy and data analytics group. So got some great exposure there. I wrote a white paper on how the NBA can monetize international streaming using international low income regions using over the top streaming, excuse me. And presented that at a few small conferences and got to meet with several industry colleagues now, but at the time, industry mentors who were able to kind of give me advice and put myself out there as someone who is in this space. And yeah, I mean, just a really great experience in business school. And so again, as I mentioned, pressure test of this goal to work in the space, and happy to share with you that certainly the pressure test results were that it was validated, right? I enjoyed the work. I really found a lot of value and satisfaction in what I was doing day to day. And so I graduated in the middle of 2020. As I think we all remember, it's middle of the pandemic, very interesting time for the live entertainment world. And I was pretty set on trying to find a way in, but it was an interesting time. And as I said at the beginning, timing is everything. And so was willing to wait it out for a little bit. And I did some work, as you mentioned, helped a friend of mine from undergrad launch his early stage startup. It's called Mylance. They help freelancers essentially get off the ground and run their own business. So helped him do that from, I was a first employee, and some great experience there. I went and worked for Gary Vaynerchuk and one of his business partners in New York. After that, had an interesting opportunity to help scale a side of their business that was trying to grow and diversify. And so I had certainly tangentially heard of Gary maybe, but I'm not that cool and I'm not that young. And so getting to work for him was an eye-opening experience and really enjoyed that. And then was approached a little over 2 years ago. The Arizona Coyotes were looking to build out a strategy and analytics team. And I interviewed for and was very fortunate that I was selected for the role. And so I've been with the Coyotes about 2 years. I run all things business strategy, business intelligence, data analytics. That all falls under our department, and it's been a very rewarding 2 years. I started as a team of one. We're now up to a team of six plus a shared data engineer with hockey ops, and so we've got a great group. I'm very fortunate. I have amazing teammates who push me every day, help make our organization better every day, and it has been a lot of fun. It has been a lot of work. It has been sometimes very stressful, sometimes very hard to feel like you're making progress in the day to day. But I have been very fortunate to work in this industry for as long as I have, and I am encouraging anyone who might be listening to your podcast that this is a space that is absolutely worth the time and the patience and the sweat and the frustration and tears to get into the space. It's worth all of that if this is what you want to do, because this is a very rewarding and a very exciting and a very interesting place to
Yeah, Sam, thank you so much for sharing your route to date so far. It's excellent. And as I like to do when I get on with the podcast after people share their route, I kind of want to go back to the beginning, then we'll work our way back to where we are now. So let's say we go back to the time where you're applying to go to Duke, right? As you mentioned, I think your first major was chemistry, and that's kind of where you thought you were going with pre-med. Was there maybe a specific class, a lecture, an interaction, a point in time where like this isn't for me. Like I can't be a doctor or I can't do this because I feel like after 100 and almost 50 episodes or so, it seems like there's always that fork in the road that the guests and almost everyone in the world probably gets to where you make almost a life-changing decision at 16, 17, 18 to attend school. And then once you start getting a little insight into what that world might be like, you're like, actually, I don't think that is for me. And I think I had that same experience as well. So was there a point in time that made you realize, hey, I'm not ready to be a doctor? Hey, maybe this just isn't for me.
No, it's a great question, and I think about that a lot. There wasn't any specific moment where I said I don't see myself being able to do this. It was more, I don't. So I'm the son of two doctors. My fiance is also a doctor, so I've had a lot of people who are very involved in medicine in my life for most of my life, and I think I got some advice from my dad when I was thinking about pre med. I was a sophomore, maybe a junior in college, and he said, "Look, like a lot of people, medicine is an amazing career, right? It is very rewarding. You help people, you help sick people, you help hurt people. You have an impact on people at their absolute worst, though some of the worst days of their lives. You get to make that better." But you need to have the calling, right? And it's almost cliche, but he said, you need to have this calling that this is your life's passion, right? And that like this is your life's purpose. And if you don't have that, if the reasons you're going into medicine are just because you think it's prestigious or stable or pays well or interesting, you will burn out, right? Like it is impossible to maintain sort of those are really just on the periphery of what makes someone a good doctor, and that's not enough to sustain you. And I think it was, my parents know me very well. The people in my life know me quite well, and it made me think for a second. Maybe he's right. Maybe this isn't for me. And I wasn't. I sort of thought, okay, well, maybe I'll go to med school in a couple of years. There's a lot of people who do that. And what do you do if you want to work in a job that you're, able to pivot out of pretty easily? You go into consulting. And so, I finished out my degree. I picked up an economics degree as well to help bridge the gap of some of the skills that I thought I needed to be successful in the business world. But it wasn't until I was in consulting for several years that I really made that final decision of, Chris, I'm not going to be a doctor, right? And who knows what the future holds? I don't see myself going back to medical school now, but no, I think for me it was always about not having that calling and trying to make a mature decision about where I was going to go. And now having again been around people who are in that field for my entire life, it has certainly validated that choice. I think one of the things I enjoy about the sports world is that we're not driving an ambulance, we're not doing surgery, right? And so I think like what we do, we can be creative, we can experiment. If your heart surgeon is in the middle of a life-saving procedure, you don't want them trying new things, right? And medicine is
Mhm.
driven on evidence-based approaches and thousands of trials doing things, at the molecular level, and then in the lab, and then in real life, on animals, but not in like contrived situations. And only then do you test it on people, and only then, after like repeated demonstrated success, do we do that. But we don't have the luxury of that kind of time or that kind of constraint in sports. And so, because we're not doing that, we do get to try new things, and we do get to be a little creative. And certainly, I think it's something that has been a fun and engaging field to work in. And so, the long answer to your short question is there wasn't any single moment. It was more just getting to know myself a little bit better, having some introspective guidance from people in my life who are very, very important to me, and realizing that this wasn't my calling. This wasn't my life's dream, and that's okay, right? And it wasn't wasted time pursuing that, because even though, and your goals change, right? My first day at IBM, my goal was to make partner one day. And
Mhm.
that changed pretty quickly. And I think, like, it's okay to have goals that change, because you're still growing, you're still becoming a better person, you're still becoming more talented and more versatile as a professional. And so I think, like, I don't view that time pursuing that pre-med degree as a waste at all. I view it as an opportunity to learn more about myself and come out of it with a pretty unique skill set that has helped me a lot in my career.
Yeah, that's an amazing answer. I think that just the perspective about just, the goals are always changing. Right? You're always evolving as a person, realizing, what fits and what doesn't in regards to your career or who you are as a person. So I think that makes a ton of sense. And even just as you're saying that, I was just looking off and thinking about it myself. And I was like, yeah, that makes a ton of sense, even to where I feel I'm at the moment. So I appreciate you sharing that. And I guess then building on that, right? You're a student at Duke. That's what we were just talking about. And that's how you kind of made the decision to maybe go in a different route, let's say. You graduate university and you decide to go into consulting. Was that more so a position where, as you mentioned, I think it would be easy for you to then pivot once you realize maybe what would be something you'd be more interested in? Or was it also just, hey, I think this would be a great opportunity for me to learn a lot, touch on a lot of different businesses and see how they function, and then kind of move on from there? Or what else could it be? Because maybe there's other answers, I'm sure.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think I would encourage anyone listening to this, or anyone who I would ever give guidance to, should never take a job because of the next job you might get, right? Like, you should
Yeah.
take a job for the job that you have. And so I think, yes, consulting has certainly given me some flexibility in my early career that maybe I wouldn't have had if I had gone a different direction. But very much like it was what you shared, right? Like, it seemed like interesting work. The idea of going from business to business and solving different challenges and trying to take lessons learned from client A and apply them to client C. That seemed like a very interesting environment to be in.
Mhm.
I also think there is an element of just learning that happens when you are faced with very different situations, day to day, week to week, month to month, project to project. Like, I got to work on just some very unique and different things that, I maybe never would have had exposure to. My very first project at IBM, we were helping a financial services firm implement a new technology platform. Basically, you log into your bank's website. We were helping implement the back end of that, right? And it was a multi-year, 100 people from IBM at this project, many work streams. And, it might not have, I don't know that I ever would have learned about banking technology if I hadn't gone into consulting. And certainly I don't know that I have a passion for it, but I
Mhm.
learned a lot, right? I learned about how big businesses run and change technologies, right? And so I think, like, the opportunity to do that. And then my next project was working on a bit of an internal effort trying to launch a mobile app that was helping to power some of the salespeople at IBM, right? And so again, you know, learned a ton about mobile development and the mobile development cycle and agile versus waterfall project approaches, and all these things that, like, I might have never had exposure to if I hadn't gone into this field. And so I think, like, for me, as someone who didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, and I still don't know exactly what I want to do, I think that it's important to have that intellectual curiosity and always have a different or an openness to pivoting. But as someone who didn't know exactly what he wanted to do, I knew that consulting would be stimulating, be interesting. I would work with really smart people. There was a very brief period where I thought the airline miles would be pretty nice, but I got tired of that pretty quick. And yeah, I think that, for me, it was very much what you said. Interesting work, learning a ton, really, really smart people, and a field that was going to help me continue to grow and discover myself through the nature of the work and the challenges I'd be faced with on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. And sorry if I misspoke earlier saying that's why you went to consulting. I just meant like maybe it was just an opportunity to learn more, as you mentioned.
Yeah,
But
no.
yeah, that sounds like an excellent thing, especially whether it's people listening, just seeing as that for an opportunity to learn more and see how the different, let's say, industries work and function. On a kind of, let's say, a side question relating to that. Let's say someone's listening to this, they're about to graduate, or I guess we're in August, so they did just graduate, and they're looking to get, let's say, that first career, let's say, out of university. Having been in the consulting space, was there any, let's say, industries that stood out to you? I know you maybe mentioned some. They're like, oh wow, those are very interesting. Maybe I'd like to, look into those further one day. And are there also maybe other industries that you're like, I'm going to stay clear of those because I have no interest in maybe being involved in food production, something like that. I don't know if you have any insight in that. I know it's a little off topic, but I think that'd be something interesting to hear.
Yeah, I think it comes down to what kind of problems you enjoy solving, right? Do you
Mhm.
enjoy solving problems where you are, figuring out something that works on a very small level and then scaling that to an infinite level? Maybe consumer packaged goods is a good direction to go, right? Like, if you think about CPG companies and then the stores that sell those products, I mean, it's a pure volume play, right? Like the margin for Procter and Gamble on any individual shampoo bottle is tiny, but they just move billions of shampoo bottles and they are able to make a phenomenal amount of money because of that, right? Like, I think if you enjoy those types of problems, then go to the industry where we're going to solve that. Do you enjoy the scientific approach, the really, really, I don't want to say tedious because it's a good thing, right? The really intense, should we say, uh, laborious process of research. And again, what I had alluded to, solving problems that are going to have an enormous and potentially life changing impact on someone, then can you go into a field like pharmaceuticals, where you are making these very rewarding and very very impactful decisions, and it is important to be precise and detail oriented. Do you enjoy, for me, what is it about sports? I mean, we're making a product that people like to consume, right? Like, I don't know, and I have some. This is not a slight against P&G, right? Like I have some absolutely phenomenally smart classmates who ended up there, but I don't know that people get as excited about their shampoo as they do about the hockey team or getting to go to a live event or watch a play on Broadway, right? And so for me, it's always been about getting to work on those types of problems, right? Do you enjoy these macro level, trying to come up with really complex math models to leverage different assets to make sure your business is going to take advantage of information you think you have that others don't? Then finance is maybe a good direction for you to go. So I would say, think about the problems you like solving and the environments that you really thrive in, and then pursue a career there. And again, like, don't put any decision on a pedestal, right? Like it's never as life changing as you think it is. I think, let's say you make a decision and go into a career that you think is perfect for you, and you spend 2 years there and you absolutely hate it and you are miserable and it's not what you want. That wasn't wasted time. That wasn't a bad move. You just made a decision that didn't end up being in alignment with what you thought you wanted. And that's okay, right? Like, you still grew, you still learned. Presumably, you met some interesting people along the way, and it made you that much better and more complete of a person than you were when you started. And so I think when you think about what do you want to do,
Mhm.
I like to reframe that as what problems do you like to solve? What challenges do you like to work on? And then find meaning there and pick an industry from there.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think that transitions perfectly into my next question, right? Where you said, hey, don't put that decision on a pedestal and feel free to kind of pivot from there, let's say. You went back to school afterwards for Duke, and then that's when you kind of went full force into, let's say, the sports world, right? What was that, let's say, stage of your career like? You went from consulting, you went back to school, and then you went to go work for teams like the Chicago Bulls or even just interning at the NFL. What was that transitional period of your career like? Because I'm sure is a bit different, right? Where you finish school, let's say, I think as you mentioned, the Monday to Thursday, you're traveling through the airports, gaining all these miles, right? And then going back to a classroom, obviously working on some very unique and interesting projects. But then it's a change of pace, I'm sure, right? So what was that period in time like?
Yeah, the great thing about school, and I encourage anyone listening who wants to go back to school to do it, is that it is the only time in your life where you are given access to extraordinarily smart people who know more than almost anyone else on the planet about their field. And your only job is to learn from them and absorb knowledge, understand, this absolute breadth of information that they have. Just take a little bit from that and change the way that you view the world as a result of that, right? And so I think that for me, being in grad school was 100% a time of exploration, and definitely a time for me of, let me try different things, let me explore different things. I thought I wanted to go into sports, but I also looked at tech. I looked at, consumer packaged goods, right? I looked at all those really exciting, I thought maybe go back to consulting, right? Like, so I think,
Mhm.
it is the only time in your life really when you're in school, and that applies whether you're in sixth grade or 26th, where you are solely responsible for yourself and what you want out of the experience, right? And I think for me, when I was in grad school, again, I viewed it as this pressure test of this goal. I want to work. I think I want to work in sports, but I thought I wanted to be partner at a McKinsey or a Bain or an Accenture one day, and that didn't end up being the case. And again, I had a great 4 years in that world, but it wasn't the right world for where my passion lied. And so, um, I tried to pressure test this goal as much as I could, right? And I think for me, that meant every time that I met someone who worked in the industry, I did what I could to follow up with them. I did everything I could. Again, I was not only proving to hiring managers and HR professionals and recruiting firms out there, that, hey, I can do this job. I know what it is to work in this industry, but proving to myself that this is what I wanted to do. I taught. I'm in my current phase of my career. I do a lot of coffee chats, and I'm sure anyone in the industry does. And I talk to a lot of people who say, oh, I want to work in sports because I grew up watching the Seattle Seahawks every Sunday with my grandpa, and it's just such a good memory. And I always say to them, Chris, that's a wonderful story. Go work at Goldman Sachs, make 4 times as much money, and buy season tickets to the Seahawks in a really premium section. I promise it's a much more enjoyable way to consume the content. And that's a little bit facetious, but there is truth there, right? Like, I yes, it is a privilege to work in this industry, but the times that I get to say, oh, I work in sports, that's like 0.1% of my life. The other 99.9% of my professional time, you actually have to do the job, right? Like, and so I think if you're gonna be doing this job every single day, and it's gonna be most of your professional time and a majority of your awake hours, you might as well do something you enjoy, right? And so I think for me, when I was in business school, yes, I was trying to, network my way into the space. And yes, I was trying to do things that could demonstrate my interest and competency and capabilities. But I was also trying to answer that question for myself of, is this what I want? And why am I going after this? Why do I think this is what I want? And trying to just validate that theory is how I viewed my 2 years in business school. And it was one big, again, analytical mind chemistry, one big analytical approach to proving to myself that A, I could do this job, and B, that I wanted to do this job.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense, right? Just in regards to, I've heard that a bunch of times too when people are like, "Hey, I want to work in sports," and then someone goes, "Why?" Like, "Oh, well, I love the Yankees." And it's like, "Well, you're not playing with the Yankees. You're not going to be on the field with them. You're going to be in the back end of things, and you're going to be selling tickets nonstop, right? And that's two different lives." So I definitely agree with that. And to be honest, as you're saying that, one of the questions that then comes to mind is, I wonder if at times that's almost easier, right? Let's say someone says, "Hey, I'm just a huge Seattle Seahawks fan, and that's why I want to work in sports." But then that's almost clear that, hey, maybe you shouldn't work in sports. But then, as you're mentioning too, then sometimes there's that dilemma, right, where there's the opportunity to kind of just have these cool projects you're working on versus maybe then just enjoying it as well, and then finding that balance of where it's at. Where I think someone like you, where you're able to do that analytical exercise or that mental exercise, I think as you were mentioning, where it was almost proving to yourself that, hey, this is what I want to do. So that seems like something that probably provide you a lot of great, let's say, results and findings to that. And then as your time went on through grad school, as I mentioned this briefly, you had time with the Chicago Bulls and the NFL as well while you're still an MBA student. What was that like working for those two organizations? I'm sure you gained a ton of experience and really got some great insight into what it actually was to work for an organization or even a league from the top level as well.
Yeah. No, I'm very, very thankful and fortunate to have had those experiences, right? Like when I was working with Chicago, and I'll give a plug to Kevin Brilliant because he was at the time, he was the director of strategy and analytics at the Bulls. He's since left and founded his own company. It's Take the Win. You should definitely look them up. They do mental health, inspirational, personal betterment through psychology. His whole big thing is consumer behavior, and so I would encourage, Kevin Brilliant, great last name, and that's actually his last name, but he is brilliant. So I worked for him, and then I had a chance to intern with the NFL, and it was very similar, right? Like very very smart people. I mean, just understanding those two experiences helped me understand how does a team make money, how does the league actually make money, right? Like I think again, it's very easy as a consumer to just accept the product for what it is. But I think what these experiences forced me to, well, this is actually, how this runs as a business. This is why, I mean, yes, there are plenty of owners that own the team because they like the sport or they enjoy consuming it as a fan. But at the end of the day, it's a business and they want to make money,
Mm-hmm.
and how that works. And I think like, getting to be in a position where, I think we all know the NFL has an enormous media rights deal, right? Huge, huge media rights deal, unprecedented in this industry, and we're all should aspire to get to that level one day. But being on at the league and working on the models that, well, this is how we actually project, just like a Procter and Gamble, just like a PepsiCo. This is how we project our future business cycles based on this media rights deal we have is a little bit different, right? And so I think those experiences did three things for me. I think they gave me real insight into how the business worked. They humanized the businesses for me a little bit, or maybe that's the wrong word, but I'll elaborate. And they got me excited about the type of work that I was doing. And so I think the three going through each of those, number one, just understanding how the Bulls made money, understanding how the team was constructed and what it looked like. The Reinsdorfs own the team, and then there's the players on the court, but like what that back end support staff actually looks like, getting an understanding of that, working at the NFL and understanding how does the league actually operate. That was kind of piece one. I think piece two was that, and I'm using the word humanized, so I can't think of a better one, but really just understanding that, these are businesses just like any other business, and that realization that, there's nothing inherently special. They work on a very unique product, but so does Apple, so does Google. I think every business that has unique products has a very similar challenge, and we have a very interesting one, of course, ourselves. And so getting that exposure and learning that, like, hey, this is a business just like any other business I've worked for or worked with, was a very grounding experience. And then it got me excited, right? Again, like the 0.1% of the time you get to say you work in sports is really such a small part of your life. Ultimately, it's that 99.9% of the time that you actually have to do the job that got me excited. And like being able to do that work and get a glimpse into what the day-to-day life of someone in this field was at the league, at the Bulls, across the space, that got me really excited, right? And I think, again, coming out of grad school, I felt very secure and confident in my goal to pursue this, and was willing to work through an incredibly challenging time to get to where I am today. And it also keeps me humbled and pushing forward to continue to be the best version of myself that I can be, even as we continue.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And I guess building on that, as you're mentioning, obviously the time period you're referring to is COVID, right? Obviously, the world stops. I know for my story, I just finished undergrad school. I'm from Ottawa in Canada. Then I was going to Toronto with a friend where I was going to do a bunch of interviews with a bunch of different teams. And I was like, hey, I'm going to be moving to Toronto. As soon as I get there, my phone blows with emails, phone calls, etc., saying, hey, everything's getting shut down. And I just assumed that my interview the next day was not going to happen because I had friends that worked there saying everyone was being sent home. So I was kind of curious, what was that time period like for you? I know you're mentioning it's a difficult time. Then how did you, come out of it, right? Because you're finishing, let's say grad school, and you're entering, let's say, this new industry or new phase of your career. But then obviously this global pandemic takes place. So what was that like for you, and how did you get through it?
Yeah. So I think we all remember that week, right, when the world kind of shut down, and we all have a different story. Mine, maybe should be the subject for another podcast. But long story short, I essentially I was out in Seattle visiting some friends, and then I was talking to a few colleagues at Nike, and so I spent a couple days up in Oregon at Nike HQ, just talking to some of my former colleagues who work there and doing some networking, meeting with some people. Obviously a really world-class organization in our industry that has a tremendous impact on the world and on our space. And so the week started, and I'll never forget, my fiance and my parents said something like, you really shouldn't go. And I'm like, what do you mean? I should, like, it'll be fine. And I'm texting my friends I'm staying with, oh yeah, like, no, everything's fine. And I flew up. We all, like everyone else, watched. Week started pretty normally. Watched Rudy Gobert touch a bunch of microphones. Did end up going to Nike for 2 days, but it's interesting. It was the Thursday and Friday of that week. And the Thursday, they were just sort of, I think Rudy touched everything on a Wednesday. They were just sort of starting to shut things down. And the Friday, I went on campus because they hadn't actually closed campus yet, but there was nobody there. No, absolutely nobody. And I'm thinking, I flew all the way out here to do some networking, to meet some people. And I'm sitting in the Nike cafeteria, and there's literally nobody here. Well, this was kind of strange. And then I flew home, and it was one of those things. Week started pretty normally. Flying home, I was putting on a mask, and it's like, what is this? I'm like, since when do you wear masks? Like, this is weird. Like, and then of course we all know what happened. So again, long version of that story, maybe for a different episode. But anyway, the world changed overnight, and my expectations also changed overnight. I had come out. One of the unique things about this industry, a lot of the internships you might get in business school end with a return offer, and for many people, like, you do your internship, you have a good experience, you get a return offer, and that's that. That was not my experience, and I think the NFL, when I worked for them, they were very upfront. There is no return offer waiting at the end of this summer, but we're, of course, have to keep in touch, keep close, whatever. Sure enough, there was no return offer waiting at the end of the summer. But was in the process of talking to them, talking to some other places about potential opportunities, because I really, I thought, hey, I've done the hard part. I've got the internship. I've now got a bit of a network. I can speak to the language and the specifics around what this job is. And I was, it was spring of my second year, and I was well on my way to what I was hoping was find some opportunities. And then the world shut down, and those opportunities all kind of stopped. And again, it was one of these, I had to think, what do I want to do? I just take the first job I can get. I mean, I went to grad school. I invested a lot of money, time, effort in this. Like, is it a waste if I don't have a job? Do I like give up on sports, right? Like, I mean, certainly it's not the highest paying field. There's a lot of uncertainty in the world and the economy. Do I just do something else and try to cash out, so to speak? And it was hard. It was really hard. I ultimately talked to, and I'm very, very lucky. I have a lot of close friends, mentors, confidants, and I talked to a lot of people and got advice all over the map. It's not like there was one unified, you should definitely wait it out or you should not. But I talked to enough people that I felt confident in myself, and I was willing to bet on myself. And I thought, okay, I'm going to wait this out. And there were still some jobs that were being hired for, and the nice thing about the world changing overnight, all of a sudden Zoom interviews were a big thing, right? Like, it used to be, you did maybe the first round interview on the phone, and then the second round maybe via video, and maybe if the company was really interested in investing in you, they would fly you up. Now it's like, standard, you do a bunch of Zoom interviews, and then at the very end, maybe you visit, maybe you don't. But that wasn't the case then. And so, I waited it out. And like I said, I connected with a friend of mine from undergrad who was in the process of launching his startup. And literally it was, it was his first, we had no customers when we started. And I thought this could be interesting. And it also gave me, and I was very upfront with him that I was going to continue to pursue these opportunities. And he was respectful of that. And we made it work. We made it work, but helped him launch his company. It wasn't related to sports, but still, as we talk about growing and growth experiences, launching a company is pretty unique. It's something I don't know that I'll ever do again. Certainly not the way that we did it then. And I learned a lot. And then, I had some great mentors who pushed me, reassured me, challenged me. And COVID was tough, and COVID continues to still be tough. I think we're fortunate society. It's become more endemic and less virulent and less impactful on our day-to-day lives, but certainly the world has changed forever coming out of that. But I think the other thing that COVID did is it forced our industry is, especially on the team side, we're selling live experiences. And what do you do when you can't sell a live experience? I mean, we all remember the bubbles that the NHL and the NBA did, and Major League Baseball and NFL having, no fans in the stadium. And, I think that it was a terrible thing for the industry, but it also forced the industry to achieve about 20 years of evolution in one summer, right? And so leaning on technology to deliver better fan experiences, looking at different ways that you can sell people those memories or give people those memories when they can't physically come in the arena. I think now we lean on those same lessons, right? Like, we have made the fan experience outside of the arena infinitely better. And that is because we were forced to do it in COVID. And so, I won't sugarcoat it. It was a very challenging period. It was certainly difficult being a grad student of what I completely biasedly think is the best business school in the world. And that is a very biased take. But I loved my time at Duke and would advise anyone to go there. I think it forced me to reevaluate, is this really what I want to do? Because it went from being something that seemed relatively straightforward. Oh, I got the internship. Now I got the interviews. I'm going to get one of these jobs, to something that I had to sacrifice for. And I had to find a way to make it work. And I think, it wasn't easy. It wasn't fast, and it wasn't stress-free. It wasn't tear-free, but it happened. Right. And I think, to me, coming out on the other side, I'm a better professional and a more confident person as a result, because I made it through that, so I can make it through anything.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing all that. It's kind of just like you were mentioning at the beginning, all that everyone has their own story regarding the pandemic, and I think you kind of just put it in perspective perfectly regarding your story specifically, just how those different impacts take place on you and how it then ends up shaping your route, right? So I think that makes a ton of sense. I guess then, just building on it, before we get into your position with the Coyotes, how did you then land that position with Vayner Talent? Was that something where, I know you mentioned your network and your confidence and the different mentors you have as well, and I'm sure Duke also has a great alumni base. How did that role come about, right? Because I'd assume that's not something where you would just apply on LinkedIn, where there's probably a recruiter involved or different things like that. How did that job take place, and how did you end up landing it as well?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So one of my mentors is a business partner of Gary Vaynerchuk's, and he, and it wasn't the sort of thing where he offered it immediately or anything like that. He was actually someone who just for a long time pointed me in the right direction, made introductions, was a mentor and a friend, right, and a confidant.
Mhm.
And I had applied for several roles and was going through several processes, and I think, again, we've all been on both sides of that conversation, right? And I think, when you're on the other side, when you're the person doing the helping or the mentoring, I think it's actually, very eye-opening into that person that you're helping. It's eye-opening into who they are, right? Like, do they make a good impression when they talk to your connections? Do they send thank you notes? Do they present themselves in a way that that reflects well on you because you're using some of your social capital to make that introduction. And so, one of my mentors, partner of Gary's, and basically said, look, I think you're very talented, driven, motivated. You might consider coming to work here. And he set up several conversations, met with Gary, met with several of their colleagues, and one thing led to another, and I think it just goes to show that like every interaction is an interview, whether you think it is or not, right? And again with Gary and with his company, like there was an opportunity to add value and help scale a piece of the business, and specifically the Vayner Talent business. And I was fortunate that I was able to convince enough people that I would be able to do that job, right? And so spent again, tremendous learning experience. If you are cooler and younger than me, you certainly know who the enigma that is Gary Vaynerchuk is, and I learned a ton from him. And it was something that I think pivoted me a little bit back in the industry. It was at an agency and not necessarily in a property or a league or a brand, but that is a critical and vital part of the live entertainment space as well. And we talk about picking up skills and learning things. I mean, I learned more about social media in months working for Gary than I had learned in the previous 28 years of my life. Maybe that says something about me and again, how young and how cool I am, but just a great and unique experience to see another piece of that sports business value chain.
Yeah. And building on that as well, as you're mentioning, just talking about Gary Vee, and I remember just seeing him all over social media, and you see all these different video podcasts he does as well. What was it like being a part of his team and maybe even just interacting with as well, and being a team member of his?
Yeah. Well, what I would say is he runs his business the way his personality implies he would, right? Like, it's a very open structure. There's a lot of very interesting work going on. He's obviously, I was specifically aligned to VaynerMedia and Vayner Talent, but he's got Vayner Sports. He's got a whole bunch of VaynerX, I think is what we call the ecosystem. He's got a lot. Vayner NFT was the big thing that was launched when I left, and then Be Friends was and again, not young or cool, don't know a ton about NFTs, but yeah, I mean, look, I think one thing that I really enjoyed about working at Vayner and working with Gary is that he is someone that empowers people, right? Like, if you have an idea, he will give you an audience, and that is whether you're an entry-level coordinator at his company or a senior vice president, right? Like, he is there, and I think, we would have these all-hands calls, and it was COVID, so a lot of them were virtual, but he would say, "Come to me if you need something," and he was genuine on that. I knew several colleagues who went to him, specifically him, CEO, owner of the company, and he would take the call, right? He would take the time. And it's not every day you have a leader like that. I think that Vayner, there are certainly, always going to be nuances and things about any workplace that are challenging, frustrating, annoying. No place is perfect, but what I will say about Vayner is that I learned a lot. I worked on some very interesting projects, and a lot of that is because of Gary and his business partners' approach to how they run their business. So, I would say my experience was a unique one, a positive one, and one that I'm very grateful for, because not only did it pivot me back in the industry, it forced me to learn and grow a ton.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And one of the questions I have before we have the last two questions I like to ask every guest is maybe just touching on your time at the Coyotes now. How did that role come about? I think that's kind of an interesting part of everyone, right? Whether it's through your network, whether it's just a connection of yours that made the introduction. And what does the day-to-day look like working a part of an NHL franchise?
Yeah, no, the Coyotes, I think, again, they were looking to, my now boss, the COO, was looking to build a strategy and analytics team. And they had elements of that function previously, but through some turnover, the team wasn't really there anymore. And so I was hired to build a team. And like I had mentioned at the beginning, we're now a team of 7, started as just a team of 1. So much more fun when you're a team of 7 than 1. And how it came about, I mean, I wish I had a more inspiring story, but the reality is, networking plus applying for the job, and asking for help from my network, helped, right? Like, so I think, I was fortunate. I landed the interview and then made a good enough impression in the interviews that they picked me for the job. And it was a pretty standard process, pretty standard, again, I wish I had a cool story, but I don't. But that's not to say that's not indicative of how cool the opportunity has been, because I have had a great experience with the Coyotes. I mean, building out my own team, having a group that's collaborative, and we have a tremendous team that impacts the business. And what we do, I like to think of it in terms of three buckets. We do what I call like data analytics and business strategy. We do internal consulting, and then we do like longer term strategic projects and roadmap development. And so each of those things, are elements that are critical to running our business. And as I had alluded to earlier, they exist at every business. So data analytics, business strategy, that's, building dashboards in Tableau, managing our data warehouse, managing our ETL for various integrations that we have with vendors and our data sources. And so that's kind of that piece. Internal consulting, so we do a lot of one-off projects to help other departments. Could be helping marketing calculate ROAS, could be helping ticket sales with a variably priced ticket model. Vendor analyses, we do a lot of that. And then we work, again, we roll up under the COO. And so we do work very closely with leadership and ownership. And we are frequently asked to help with these bigger strategic projects. Obviously, our franchise has a lot of big strategic projects like any property does. And so, I think it's a nice mix of very specific, very short time horizon projects and very long time horizon projects. And so I've got a great team, or we've got a great team, I should say, because we are a team. And we work on a lot of very interesting parts of the business. I'm going into, this will be my third season with the Coyotes, and puck drop in just about a month and a half. And so very excited for that. And it's been a wild journey. Brought me and my family out to 120-degree Arizona as I look outside. But it has been a lot of fun, and it has been very, very rewarding.
Yeah, that's quite the journey today, and I appreciate you sharing. And the last two questions I ask every single guest for this podcast is, we just went through your route to date so far, and I like to just kind of put a bow on it all by asking these two questions where I like to say I'm going to live until I'm 103. I'm going to be on a rocking chair, just thinking about all the things I've been able to do in my career. And if I put you in that same situation, so 103-year-old Sam, you're on the rocking chair, is there one story to date that would stand out to you when you're 103 on that rocking chair, thinking about maybe some of the cool things you've been able to do in your career so far?
Well, I'm very fortunate. I've done a lot of what I'll call cool things. I think I've done a lot, and I think it's a privilege to work in this industry, and that's part of it. But if I had to pick one really cool story, well, you're putting me on the spot. But one thing that I got to do, Mark Laurie was a client of ours when I was at Vayner. And one of the things that we did is helped with, you might know, Rich Eisen runs the 40-yard dash every year for charity. And I got to be involved with that because Mark set it up where it was like multiple celebrities running with multiple alumni from the NFL and Rich. And so we put on this big, we essentially did, for lack of a better way of describing it, we were event planning and management to make this happen. And it was a very rewarding experience. Pretty cool. Mark did fly everyone out on his plane from New York, and that was something I don't know if I'll ever be on a plane like that again. But no, I mean, just a very rewarding experience. I mean, sure, it was awesome to get to be a part of this from like a consumer standpoint and a fan, but also to do something and see the impact and have participants tell me, hey, yes, you were kind of back end management and you weren't one of the people running the 40 for charity, and that's good because I'm not that fast. But getting to be a part of that and just looking back on that, and it's one of these things like in the moment, you're so tied up in the like day to day, and even like in the immediate aftermath, it's you're exhausted and you're just happy it all went off without any major problems and the event is over, and you're just like relieved almost. But now I'm a couple years removed. I mean, it was a little over 2 years ago. And being able to look back on that and think, wow, we did that is something that if I'm still around at 103, that is one of those stories that I think I'll always cherish and be willing to share.
Yeah, no, that's such a good story, and it seems like there's a theme with your route so far, with a lot of air miles as well, and just airplanes and
Well, you
on
actually don't get air miles when you fly private, surprisingly.
yeah.
So
So, well, I just mean like just flying around, but no, that's good stuff.
I
And
know,
the
I know.
last
Yeah.
question, yeah. The last question I have for you is, so we went into the future, 103-year-old Sam. Let's go back to 16, 18 year old Sam. You're about to walk on the Duke campus for the first time as an undergraduate student. What's one thing that maybe you learned to date so far? And it doesn't need to be anything, overwhelming where like, hey, do this and you have to live by this. But what's maybe one piece of advice that you've learned to date so far that if you got to go back in time and talk to a younger version of yourself, it would be, hey, this is something that I've learned and I think would be really valuable to you or even anyone listening as well?
It's a great question. I think I would tell myself two things. I would say, have confidence in yourself, believe in who you are, and I would say it's going to be okay. I think that, it's tough because like I could probably use that same advice today at
Mm-hmm.
32. I'm sure at 52, I'm going to say I should have, lived by practice what I preach. But I think no, when you're young and you're trying to figure out, really, really figure out, like, I think we know a general direction by the time you get to our point in our career. But when you're really young, I mean, it is, totally open ended, and the world is your oyster, and that's an incredible thing. But it's also scary, right? It's really scary because you don't know, like, what if I pick the wrong thing? And I think I would just tell myself, look, it's you are smart, you are talented, you are in a lot better shape than you'll be at 32. You will probably never be able to dunk, but at least back then you could touch the rim, and you should cherish that. um, it's going to be okay. Like, you are talented, you are going to an amazing school, you are very, very fortunate, you have many people in your life who support you and love you, and just enjoy the ride, right? Take it all in. It goes fast, it only continues to go faster. And it's, trust in yourself and have confidence in yourself and believe in yourself that no matter what happens, even if you make that decision and go a direction that in hindsight maybe you might have gone a different direction, it's going to be okay, right? It's going to work out. And I think like that is what is so important, um, when you are young and you are finding your way. And it's something that I would tell myself. I caveat that I probably wouldn't listen to myself. And, like I said, just like now, I probably could use the same advice, and I probably wouldn't listen to myself now. But I do think for anyone else who's listening and watching this, that is important, and that is really a big just take a breath. It's going to be all right. Rely on yourself, trust on yourself, and you're going to find your way.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's why I like asking that question last, because I think it just wraps it up perfectly and just puts that bow on it, as I mentioned. So Sam, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast, sharing your route, and even just all the different amazing stories you've had to date. And unless there's anything else you'd like to share, just want to thank you for coming on.
No, I mean, just if there's anyone out there who is looking for help or guidance, please reach out to me. I know it sounds like Chris is going to tag me on LinkedIn, so please shoot me a message. I am not perfect, but I do try to get back to everyone who reaches out to me. A lot of people took my calls to get to where I am today and continue to do so. I mean, I still to this day, and probably for the rest of my career, reach out to people for coffee chats, or still do that. And you'll get a lot of people who won't reply, and so don't get discouraged. But I genuinely try to respond to all of them. If I don't, follow up with me again. I'm happy to help. The only thing I ask from you is that when you make it and you are, executive vice president of data analytics for the Indianapolis Colts or whatever, pay it forward and take the calls of the people who are going to reach out to you, right? Because this industry is very network driven, and that only works if everyone contributes and buys in. So please, if I can be helpful to anyone, reach out to me. Chris is going to tag me on LinkedIn. I hope to hear from you soon. And I will do everything I can to try and reply. And if I don't, send me another message.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And just as a little side note, that's how I connected with Sam, and that's how I connected with the last 150 guests or so on the podcast. It's all been through LinkedIn. So, Sam, I really appreciate it. And that's it for episode 148. Stay tuned for next week's episode.